I'm Chris White, and this is the Electric Jesus Podcast. Let me set the scene for you. Sarah Wimber, Assemblies of God pastor's daughter, has just turned up in the band's RV. Apoplectic, band manager Skip Wick pulls into a rest area. They're halfway to the next gig, and Skip's got to think. So he calls the girl's dad, but it's too late. Pastor Wimber has already left for his mission trip to Panama. Oh, and Sarah's sisters, well...
Where are your sisters while your daddy's away?
With my aunt and uncle.
Okay.
In Ohio.
Ohio?
Cleveland. It's near Akron. On the lake.
Yeah, I'm very well aware of where Cleveland is, Sarah.
Yeah.
I tell you, y'all are gonna drive me back to drinking.
Enter Eric, the devout kid, all about spiritual accountability and rules, like no girls on the bus. Yeah, him. He's taken a shine to Sarah and has a suggestion for Skip.
Hey, Skip. She can sing. She could open for the band. I mean, she's really good.
Yeah, she's awesome. Hey, sing that song from last night.
I do not want to hear her sing.
Yes, you do. Sarah, sing.
And she does. And it's great. Plus, I mean, come on, Skip. What else are you going to do?
All right, y'all get on the camper. Let's go to Mobile.
Leave behind the doubt. Love's the only out. Love will surely find a way.
Amy Grant sucks.
Welcome to Season 2 of the Electric Jesus Podcast. I'm your host, Chris White, writer, director, and producer of the 2021 rock and roll comedy, Electric Jesus. Last season, we went behind the scenes to discover the music that inspired the world of Electric Jesus and the amazing work our team did to create an all-new soundtrack for the film. Well, this season, I've selected 9 key scenes from the film to talk about with fellow artists, authors, academics, pastors, old friends, and new. There will be spoilers, so if you've not yet seen the film, I encourage you to watch it. It's streaming all over the place, just Google it. Or better, click the link to our streaming partners in the show notes. And if you have seen the film, well, I'm guessing that since you're listening to this, the film connected with you. I'm glad, and I hope these conversations add to your enjoyment and appreciation of Electric Jesus.
Episode 5, Breaking into the Christian Boys Club.
Sara Billups is a Seattle-based writer and cultural commentator. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, Christianity Today, Ecstatic, and many other publications. Sara writes achingly beautiful Substack called The Bitter Scroll. It's a monthly Substack letter. Seriously, if you're into Electric Jesus, you will adore Sara's Substack. Her new book, Orphan Believers, just came out. It's an incredibly well-written, part memoir, part socio-political commentary on growing up evangelical. But there's this stunning layer to it. Her father's cancer diagnosis, being met with his unflinching belief in the rapture end time scenarios, familiar to so many of us who grew up in certain corners of evangelicalism. Her book is like become so personal and familiar and also like brave and saying big things. Thank you for being willing to talk to me today about Electric Jesus, Sara. I can think of no one better suited to address some of the ideas in this scene than you.
Chris, thanks. That was the coolest intro I've ever had for any podcast.
Oh, really?
and you were, I have to also say, you were in the Orphaned Believers, like reading circle, and your comments were totally my favorite. I'd read them to my husband. I'd be like, Drew, look what Chris wrote. And then we would just like We would be so pumped. So I'm really happy to be here.
Well, I remember in that at some point, I don't know if, I think you said it first, but you made some REM reference. And I'm like, okay, well,
Yeah.
forget it. We don't even have to talk about the book anymore. Let's just talk about Michael Stipe. You grew up in Indiana, right?
Yep, Fort Wayne,
right?
Indiana, northeast part of the state.
Okay, so, and I grew up in Columbia, South Carolina, and sort of different, I think different dialects, but similar culture, I think for sure.
Yep.
Very similar.
It was like the Rust Belt, Bible Belt. And yeah, I'm in my mid-40s. So I think a sort of similar era.
This scene in the film, I thought of you because, I mean, it's fun to talk to a writer because we can talk about what the scene does for the story or how it works, why you would put a scene like this in the story. And this was a late ad in the screenplay. This is a moment where this young woman, whose name is Sarah, so, okay, maybe that's why I thought of you. But it's where this young woman asserts herself and kind of gets in with the boys. And I thought of that tension of being a woman in that evangelical world. Or just the world. I'm not trying to beat up on evangelicals, but having ambition or talent or something to say, how do you start saying that? How do you start doing that in that culture?
I think that, does her name have an H, by the way? I think that's how.
No, it's Sarah without an H.
Oh, it's without an H. You know what's funny, as an aside, I was looking at the New York Times yesterday, and there was an article about the age of Emily, because now all Emilys have kind of come of age. Sarah's such a way before that. It's like the Fleetwood Mac, is it Jefferson Starship or whatever? I had that era of Sarah.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Sarah was like late 70s, early 80s. So I'm so far beyond the Emilys now, let alone like, God forbid, the Madisons or whoever comes after Emily.
Well, it's funny. My wife is an Emily, and her younger sister, Sarah, is pretty much who I named that character after.
Well, they flip-flop.
So,
yeah,
they did.
Anyways, it just came to mind. I remember that scene well. I mean, I remember a lot of scenes from the movie, Chris, and I loved the film. And that one very much sticks out to me because there's this sense when you are from a small town or a place where maybe not a lot of people have heard of. There's just this like idea of like escaping to the city, the idea of somehow leaving your suburban kind of 80s, 90s cul-de-sac, which sounds like a cliche, but that was very much my experience. And I think has somewhat of a ubiquitous kind of experiential character for a lot of kids. And as a woman, especially, like in the 90s, I was listening to like Riot Grrrl stuff. I was really aware of Olympia and like Slater Kinney. And that was because there weren't a lot of Christian ladies that I could look up to in that way. I mean, there was Amy Grant, like we mentioned in that scene, and there were all of the Tooth and Nail bands that were very much male-led. There were a few exceptions, but not really. So I wasn't seeing kind of a creative role model. And I go to music because in terms of Christian writers, I really could not think of any young or even sort of more established Christian writer, except, I mean, someone like Annie Dillard. My mind was not like at Tinker Creek in those years. My mind was
right.
And so there wasn't guiding light of me thinking culturally, this is sort of where I want to go or who I want to follow. There wasn't a lot of navigation. It just felt like a pretty big open map. And so my option was to think about who I could be inspired by that was maybe not a Christian, but that was doing cool art or music. So I would think about what was going on in the Northwest in that time. But this like need to escape, what if I could be there? Who would I become? There was an excitement and freedom, but also a fear, because what if I would leave and then I would lose my faith, or my Christian identity would get wiped out right away because I couldn't handle kind of like the wide world.
Was that something that you feel was in the culture? Like I remember there was some of it was like, let's get out into the world and change the culture. Let's be really excellent and good at things and show the world that Christians are good too. But then it felt like there was something that if you stepped into it a little too much, then maybe, I don't know about that. We need you.
Totally. Yeah. Especially coming to Seattle. Because by the time we had landed, Mars Hill was kind of on the rise. It's a whole other situation. Yeah. This is like the early aughts. But I very much think that kind of writing off there was like that return to city stuff. Maybe that was a little later when Tim Keller was planning Redeemer. There was a lot of talk about intentional community, and Shane Claiborne was talking about kind of missional living in urban context. Like that certainly was in the water. And I think that I followed that wave out here with a lot of optimism and sort of the boundless energy and access I thought my white middle class youth gave me. So that was less gendered and more kind of cultural Christian, I think, at the time. But I sensed that too.
When you were in your youth group days, like in a youth group meeting or a summer camp or a retreat, were there ever any women teachers? Or a woman teacher that was addressing the whole group?
There were never any women teachers ever. And in fact, there was a church that was built behind our house. We lived in a ranch, 50s ranch. And there was word was spreading that there was a female pastor. And I just remember my dad thinking, like, I can't believe people go to that church. I mean, it wasn't like a neutral thing. It was like bad. It was bad, kind of like the Toronto Blessing was ultra freaky and people were wearing like lions and that was bad. Kind of like Catholics aren't really Christians and that's bad. There was not a nuanced look about it. It was a clear directive.
What about like, were there youth, we had interns that sometimes helped with our youth group, like college people. Were there like a Sunday school? Who were the women 5 to 10 years older than you that you would meet or come across that you like, for lack of a better word, idolized or just, oh my gosh, she's so great. We love her so much. Do you remember people like that?
Yeah. There were not any. There was a woman that directed the kind of like preschool to 5th grade program. So it was just younger kids. Certainly Vacation Bible School was led by women. It wasn't, and I went to like a Lutheran high school. There were some really cool female teachers. My journalism teacher, Mrs. Hebel, allegedly strapped herself to a tree that she didn't want to get cut down. And we all thought that was crazy cool. And she had a photo of Bill Clinton in the classroom. And so we were just like, who is she? Who is this person? So Mrs. Hebel in high school was kind of my first. And then I went to Taylor, which is an evangelical college in the Midwest in Indiana.
Yeah.
And there were some really cool women profs, art profs, a journalism prof, kind of in that space more. But it really was not until my late teens to early 20s that I found kind of a female role model in any kind of Christian space.
I mean, that didn't occur to me. There were so many opportunities. I mean, I met all sorts of cool college guys and, just older guys. There was always like an older guy that was kind of like a cool big brother who knew about cool music. Again, I just assumed that maybe that was happening for the girls too.
Yeah.
You write beautifully in the book about, this is something that I so admire because it's so difficult to do. I tried to do it in Electric Jesus. I probably erred on one side or the other so many times, but to actually love the character that is, maybe you aren't comfortable with their position and where they are. Maybe they do stupid things or awful things, but you love them. So it creates this space where you can write a real person or create a real person. Talk a little bit about that, the family you grew up in and their good intentions of why you were here. Obviously, they weren't like, we want to keep you away from strong, smart, ambitious women. That's our goal. That's one of the goals. They just chose a culture to be a part of. Totally. And describe what that was like.
Yeah, that's right. Well, my mom, is Italian, Catholic, raised in Chicago, and my dad was, from a secular Jewish home, Reformed Jewish home. They went to high holidays at the temple. And from Fort Wayne, Indiana, there were like 300 Jewish families. They ended up meeting when they were late teens at a bar over the state line in Ohio because you could drink when you were 18 and got married quickly. And that was super, super bad. They ended up getting divorced after 6 months. And then my dad went to this Bible study. Yeah, it was a very weird time. I don't even understand. But my dad went to this Bible study at his friend's apartment in Indiana on the book of Daniel because he was super desperate and lonely. Then he had this really radical conversion, like pretty profound, where after going a few times, I guess it was a couple of months, one night he just like felt like the Holy Spirit, like, come on him. And he talks about it in this very cinematic way where he leapt over the couch, ran to the parking lot and fell on his face and became a Christian. And my mom ended up seeing him a few months later and his face had literally changed. Like, she didn't recognize him at first. Like, his countenance had lifted. It was very beautiful. Yeah. So he had this radical conversion. They got back together and had me. And by the time I came along, I mean, my dad was saved. And next to the Bible, of course, was Late Great Planet Earth by Hal Lindsey, which at the time had sold more copies than Joy of Sex, like top of the New York Times bestseller list, ubiquitous in culture. There was an Orson Welles narrated TV special on.
That's right.
Everybody knew Late Great. And so the kind of Christianity I was raised in then was very much kind of a dual partnership between the gospel and the rapture, and so I was raised like a lot of us, hearing that I wouldn't grow up to have a career, a family, or whatever. I should be pumped because Jesus was returning. And so, I mean, it's such a common story, and talking about it now, it's so kitschy to think about the Christian scare movies or whatever the kind of funny culture war issues were of the time, like backmasking on records or whatever it was. It all seems silly, but as I think a lot of us know that as a kid, when you're forming, there's this like visceral fear that comes over you, thinking about what would happen if Jesus returned and you couldn't live life or have sex or be in love or whatever. There's just, so some of it sounds funny now to us, but growing up, it was freaky. And so my childhood was very much a mixture of worrying about Jesus coming. And we talk about it like football. Like we talk about it actively all the time at dinner. We would talk about whether an earthquake would mean that it was closer. It was something that was a part of my weekly conversation. And it's something that I carried and held through high school, honestly. So I think instead of female role models, my parents were more concerned about whether or not we were going to make it into the book of life and if we were ready for Jesus to return.
A man and wife asleep in bed. She hears a noise and turns her head. He's gone. I wish we'd all been ready. Two men walking up a hill. One disappears and one's left standing still. I wish we'd all been ready. There's no time to change your mind. The sun has come and you've been left behind.
In the movie, when I kind of think of it as Sarah raptures herself out of her family life. You're talking about that jump. I would assume it was post-college when you went to Seattle. That meant something to you.
Yeah. In undergrad, I went to an NYU program one summer. I think the city had kind of had me at hello, and so I'd had a lot of few month stints, different places. So Seattle did not seem super, I don't know.
Babylon? You weren't going to Babylon?
Yeah, it did not feel like Babylon. What it felt like was like creative freedom. And so I had managed to hold on to my faith in New York for a couple of summers when like the weight of that city and like the way that it works is so fun and so cool and so fast. And I didn't see God anywhere. Like I didn't know when I was in college how to do that. I just kind of like lost myself hanging out in the city for a couple summers, or like San Francisco too. And so I think when I got to Seattle, it was less like Babylon and more like, could this be the place where I could be a cool Christian and maybe I could have an aesthetic and be interested in books and music and ideas and come here and still maintain that identity. But very quickly, I realized that was a myth I'd made in my mind. I mean, I began to make the myth of Seattle in middle school when I heard Nevermind for the first time, and my head almost blew off my shoulders because what was that sound, And that was like at a sleepover. Like Seattle was mythic then with like Riot Girls, like I mentioned. There was a whole story in my mind, a whole narrative around this pioneering, sort of rugged, beautiful Northwest, where I could finally feel like I had a wholehearted sense of self and get away from my parents and the Midwest and whatever kind of weird church setting I had growing up. But I got here and I realized this place has its own complications. Identifying as a Christian here is exhausting. Nobody gains any social capital. It's not actually what I think it is. And so there was sort of a pretty quick, the balloon kind of let out the air really quickly when I got here. And it became a pretty disorienting time for a long time. It took me about 12 years to figure out what I was doing and what it meant to be a Christian in a place like this.
What did it mean to be a Christian in a place like that?
It meant, well, what it finally meant, I think, for me is there was no reason culturally to have this identity at all.
Oh, right.
And so I had to get serious about it. And that was something that happened not until I was in my mid to late 30s. It took a long time.
And if you had gone somewhere like Nashville, that wouldn't have been true. The Christian thing would have been awesome.
Yeah, that's right. Maybe that would have been actually a closer expression of where somebody would have gone if they wanted to be a quote cool Christian.
Yeah.
But it wasn't here. It definitely was not here. Yeah. And I'm glad, because it's like, again, if you show up at church here, it's refreshing. You don't you typically want to be there.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of refreshing and a little bit like an exhale. Like I'm not showing up, I'm not showing off, I'm not gaining anything from this.
There's so much great writing on your Substack about that idea. Find the piece about the revival, because in that piece, I love this. I struggle with the same thing. You have a very cynical first response to news of spiritual awakening and the kids having this ecstatic reverie in the name of Jesus. And you can't help, I mean, we can't help it. Of course we're going to be. And then you have to unpack that and step back and just go, why can't the kids have that? I mean, these kids are desperate and sad. And, you know, you're just being one of the grumpy old people, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
We're going down the road and figuring out how they're all going to crater out and crash.
Yeah.
But I love that you catch yourself in that.
Yeah, that's right. It's not my job to figure out what happens next. And that's good, because I had to edit myself pretty hard with Asbury. I just thought, why is this happening now to these people? Now everybody wants to go see it. They should stay home.
Yeah.
Why does everyone have to go? It's not an experience. I just was so I was so Gen X-y about it. I was so typically cynical. And then I realized, who am I? Like, God can do what God wants to do, and that's beautiful. And you know what happened? I went to see Adrienne Linker, the Big Thief singer. She had a solo tour in Seattle last year. And I walked in, it was at Washington Hall in Central District here in Seattle, and everybody there was in their 20s. Everybody was Gen Z. There was one guy with gray hair in the balcony, but I was clearly one of a handful of people in my 40s there, you know. And at first I felt so awkward and why am I here? I feel so self-conscious. Then of course, no one cares. Who gives a freak? Who's there? Number two,
Right.
I looked around and everybody was so earnest and listening. You could hear a pin drop, so engaged. Everybody was so awkward. It looked like the 90s, Chris. It was so great. And I realized I had this maternal love for Gen Z. I love these kids. I love their clothes. I love how they show up. I'm super into these kids. And then I realized, if these are the kids that at a revival in Asbury are having some kind of meeting of God, bless them. So I had to turn it a little bit and find the joy in it.
I read somewhere, maybe this reference will ring a bell with you, but I read something like the sin of a young man is lust, the sin of middle age is pride or ambition or something, and then the sin of the old man is bitterness. Yeah, I think that's really wise. That's really smart. And so much of me right now, it's how do I insulate myself against bitterness? I just don't want to be bitter. We've seen the generation before us, both sides politically, are just running off a cliff of despair.
It's true.
It's just sadness to me. You know, it just feels, I don't want to be like that.
Once upon a time, down by the water treatment plant. Once upon a time, we made a fire. Raised the center up and drove the stakes into the ground. Once upon a time, upon a wire. And I remember everything, even things that never were. Call me if you can, call me anything. I just like to be where you are. I would like to be where you are.
I think it's funny when the guy tells her that Amy Grant sucks. I don't think I would have had him say the line if I met Amy Grant after the movie, and I'm glad I didn't know her before, because I kind of had some fun with Amy Grant in the movie. Fun. I just treat her like a fan that wouldn't know her, and she's an incredibly amazing. She's an amazing person. So I like it. I like the line, Amy Grant sucks, because that's what my friends would have said. But I see that line as more of, you don't belong here. Okay, you're going to get in the van and you're going to come on this trip, but you're in our world now. We are in charge. Surely you felt that at some point.
Yes. For me, so when I got into like going to Cornerstone or tooth and nail bands or whatever, I began to realize really quickly that it was just like if guys in my high school would talk about football or sports or whatever, like music was its own subculture. So going to those festivals, like seeing who was on stage, seeing who kind of had voice, or like going to the merch tent and seeing people like talking shop about equipment, like it very much felt like a gendered thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I didn't find a lot of other women in that space. And so I think it wasn't until I was a lot older that I began to sort of find my own voice. It's surprising to me that it took so long. I mean, I'm in my mid-40s, and in a lot of ways, I think the process of beginning to write publicly about faith and culture in my late 30s was a process of me coming to terms with how I had not in my life so far been in spaces where there were strong women of faith that were leading. I'd not interacted with those women. I'd not had a community with them. And I think that especially in Christian publishing, if you're a woman, it means you write a certain kind of book. You write something that is self-helpy but Christian. It's filed under a certain thing, or you're considered super progressive. Right. There's like this weird pull either way. I think that with Orphaned Believers, it was really important for me in the book cover, in the subtitle, certainly in the journalistic approach and in the writing that I do, to be clear that I am not just speaking to women, but yet I am a woman trying to kind of navigate a community of other people, other thinkers that identify as female, that are doing cool work that is not gendered work. And so I think the publishing industry in general has a real vibe around it that I was surprised to discover later in life, but I've also more recently navigated.
Well, one of the things that happened just in the film and structuring the film and writing the film, I was writing to a rock and roll movie template that so many rock and roll movies write to, and the female is the muse, right? It's that idea of the muse shows up and everybody awakens somehow to the muse. And at some point I caught myself, I'm like, oh, I'm doing that dumb thing they always do. And then what ended up happening, that character kept asserting herself. And I was like, there's something sneaky happening. And I think what's happening is she's trying to be the protagonist.
Yeah.
Then once the movie was done, and I'm like, oh yeah, she is the protagonist. She's the person moving forward. She's the person that changes. Eric never changes.
See, I think Sarah figured it out a lot sooner than certainly a lot sooner than I did. And I think a lot of my peers, I think that she was fearless. I think she probably had a lot of fear, but also kind of this intuitive, I saw her as having an intuitive fearlessness, or at least more of a risk-taking posture that I think probably got her to a place of autonomy or some sort of freedom a lot more quickly than it did me. And I would characterize myself not as like a good girl necessarily. Like I certainly, in terms of ideas or aesthetics, felt very free. But in terms of how that played out in my choices, it took me longer. So I just think Sarah's the coolest.
Well, my wife says a thing. There's a scene where she leaves, and we can talk about spoilers on this, but when she leaves the club at the end, and there's a moment of like, oh my God, she doesn't have a parent. Where is she going? What is happening? How is she going to? There's a kind of a mom thing that kicks in. You're like, no. And then there's a part of you, she's like, there's a part of me that's like, go. I want to go too.
Yeah, I want to be next. Yeah, I want to be with you. Take me.
Yeah.
This is so fun. I feel like we could talk all day. And I have to tell you one other thing, which is that Drew and I sing Commando, or I don't know if that's what it's called, but we sing the chorus. So my kids have started singing it. And then my daughter, who's 10, said, what does it mean to go commando?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
So much fun. It's like our new family anthem.
So this is my friend Matt Staniz. We became friends because of the movie. We only met each other because Electric Jesus was made. Let me start here. How in the world did you find Electric Jesus? How did this become something on your radar?
Well, I believe that I first started hearing just kind of some social media buzz or whatnot, during the production of the film. I've been a fan of Daniel Smith for a lot of years, and he was sharing on and off that he was working on this film. And at some point there, I guess it was summer of 2020.
That's right.
It was through him, and he put out an invite to log on to do a virtual screening of it while we were all holed up during COVID. And I was a part of that group. We watched the film, and then you and Dan and John J. Thompson, I believe, were on a Zoom Q&A for a little bit afterwards. It wrapped up, I think, around 11. I was on the East Coast, so about 11:30 or so. I had, when I finished watching the film, to switch over to Zoom, I had hit pause on the link. And when I went back, I was able to back up, and I'm like, I'm going to look at it a little bit more, and I ended up watching the whole film again.
Whoa. Okay.
Up like 2 a.m.
Well, first, for people that don't know of Danielson family, Daniel Smith, how would you describe that band?
Oh, wow. Well, I first heard of them when this first record came out, which was actually, I think it was an art school project.
Yes.
And Dan Dan lives in southern New Jersey, and I'm not far from there, outside of Philadelphia. He, that when that record first came out, I probably heard they had a comp CD or something that had one of the videos or songs on it. Yeah. And it is, it's not like anything else musically. You could kind of call, it's kind of an outsider art or a freak folk or something like that.
Yeah, I like that.
Kind of very, very creative musically. A lot of Dan's singing is in a falsetto that, those who are looking for something really typical for top 40 radio might not take to right away, but just very interesting music. And then just this really just this clever combination of being really artful and artsy, but this really sincere Christianity. It just goes through a lot of what is there, but never in a way that it never would have fit into the Dove Awards or something.
Oh no. I'll tell you this. I may or may not include this in the podcast, but when we made the record, I kept saying we have to win a Dove Award. We have to at least be nominated for a Dove Award. And we, the soundtrack record, we pursued that a little bit, but there were just too many things on the record that weren't Christian enough to be nominated for a Dove Award. We should have done a single. I think maybe, I don't know. I think Commando for Christ might have made some waves at the Dove Awards, but we missed the window, whatever it was. When you heard that Daniel was doing music for a film inspired by Stryper, a film inspired by Christian rock and specifically Christian hair metal, did you scratch your head and say, like, wait, what? Or did you say, yes, of course, this is perfect. Of course he's doing that. What was your thought on that?
I think my first response was probably along the lines of, I don't know what this is going to be, but count me in.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought when he said he would work on the music
scene. Yeah, that music scene is what I grew up with and what I loved as a teen, and I knew that Dan had that real sincerity to it, but he also wasn't he wasn't a part of that scene musically necessarily. Certainly with the stuff he's released, and I just thought, I'm like, he's going to pull pull something really really amazing out of his artistic hat, and he sure did.
Let's go to you. When you were growing up, when you were a kid, were you a Christian kid? Were you a church kid? Tell me about you growing up, and I mean like kid from childhood through your teenage years. What was your world like, at least in Christianity, or the world that would lead you to something like Danielson family? What was that like for you?
Well, as a kid, church was always a thing, and it was kind of a part of life and what was going on. One side of my family was Roman Catholic, and the other side was kind of a mix of Presbyterians and Baptists. And I lived in the city and in the neighborhood with near my Roman Catholic family, and I went to Catholic school for a few years in elementary school. Right around, right as before I became a teenager, I think there was this culmination of events. One, my mom, and it was just my mom and my sisters and I in the family. She got involved in a Bible study. I think it was this was the early 80s. So it was probably the ongoing impact of like the Jesus movement. And,
sure.
She got into that, and we changed churches, and then we moved out of the city.
The city being Philly, right? That was
in the city. Actually, the city was Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Pittsburgh. Okay.
I made an eastward trek as an adult to Philadelphia. We moved to a smaller town, and two things were going on there. One, I didn't know anybody, and we kind of this new church became kind of the center of my social universe, as well as going to a Christian summer camp. So right there, as I was starting my teens, there was kind of an experience of all of a sudden Christianity and following Jesus was going to be a big part of my budding identity, and that's when and music just was a huge part of that.
It's not like you have all these great ideas, even if you're a Christian kid or whatever. It's not like you've figured out the world, but suddenly there's a presentation of a song, a band, an album, and you're like, at least for me, it was like, oh, I want to be that. That's something I want to be a part of. And then you collect these records, you collect these tapes, these CDs, and they become an expression of, I'm in this space.
Yeah, I think so. I remember, getting those first couple cassette tapes, first couple concerts, and just the sense of, this is, this music is expressing something, the thing that's inside of me, and it's with it, as a teenager, and really kind of getting into Christian music, especially as a sense that it was simultaneously kind of helping me express myself, but I also had this like sense that it was teaching me something, this sense that Christian music was forming faith in me, and that was maybe more true of some songs than others, but
sure.
I was the kid who I would skip lunch at school and hold on to that dollar every day, so that by the end of the week I had enough money to buy a cassette, and I'd put the headphones on and I'd open up that card on the cassette and read every lyric.
Yeah, me too. Yeah,
as I listened to them, and a lot of the Christian bands, you would find, not just liner notes, but there would be, here's some Bible study material or Christian, Bible verses that connected this song, depending
Absolutely.
on, who they were. And so I would end up diving into that stuff as well too.
I tell people all the time, you'd open up a tape or a record or whatever, and you're listening to it, and it's literally talking about how you live your life and choices you're making, and how that connects to God. I know that was incredibly limiting to the artists who were trying to write words for their band.
Right, yeah.
But for those of us who were like 15, 16 years old, it was explaining things. It was talking about theology and ideas. And so where did you start? Like, what were some of those first Christian cassettes you were buying and loving?
One of the first Christian concerts that I went to, I was probably 13, 14 years old. This was Amy Grant's Unguarded tour with the leopard print blazer on stage.
That's a good one. Who was opening? Was that like Michael W. Smith opening, or
This
do you
was
remember?
actually there's a connection there. The opener where I saw him in Pittsburgh was Russ Taff. And
wow, that's a good one.
I left there. It was Russ Taff in his blue and yellow medals suit, and Amy Grant in her leopard skin jacket. And what I remember, is kind of coming out of that. I had those cassettes, and then it wasn't long after that. Amy Grant had that collection, kind of greatest hits called The Collection that came out.
Yeah,
and that cassette. I was thinking about it in those earliest days of that I was going through all of these changes and moving and getting into the church and all. It's kind of like my own book of Psalms almost, kind of like when I go back to the songs on that tape, I'm like, wow, those songs were really with me there. And then Russ Taff, a year or two later, he put out an album just called Russ Taff.
Oh man, and, it's got the Michael Bean song. It's got the I Still Believe. Yeah, that's a great cover. It's like one of the best covers ever.
So, I went back to Russ Taff went on tour, and I went to see him on that album, and then the opening act for him was Leslie Phillips, and then it was right when she had released this album called The Turning, which, like Russ Taff, it was like this massive shift. I think both of them kind of took this direction into here's distinctly Christian music. But it's not just it's not just there to market to Christians or to really be they weren't checking out as musicians and artists in the process. They really hit a really interesting spot there, I think, for that time.
The Turning record by Leslie Phillips, who became Sam Phillips. I remember that blew everything open. I like kind of cool Christian music like, Steve Taylor and the Choir.
Next two on my list, yeah.
But when that record came out, and then I think there was an article in CCM magazine about her saying, I'm not doing Christian music anymore. That blew my mind. Just as a kid, as a boy that wanted to be an artist, it was this. I think she was from LA, like this LA girl. She was still so young. She was working with T-Bone Burnett, and she was just trying to make art. She was a Christian, but she was like, I can't do that anymore. And then that record is so spare and beautiful. And that's when T-Bone Burnett, he had just made that Elvis Costello record, King of America, which I also love.
Right.
And then he makes The Turning, and I'm just like, I want to be a part of that.
That was I think an early part of her. I was so new to Christian music that I don't think I realized at the time how monumental that shift was. Because at the same time I was then as a teenage boy, that's when I discovered Stryper and then all of the metal bands that all kind of popped up all at once there, and that really caught my attention as a 9th and 10th grader. But at the same time, it was Leslie Phillips. Steve Taylor just amazed me. He would make me laugh and really think, with every song. And as you mentioned a little bit ago, it kind of like, it's like each song I'm like, well, that really just connects to something that's really going on in the world.
Yeah.
That was the kind of the entry for me. And then as I got older and got up into my 20s, watching that shift and going with these artists like Steve Taylor and the Choir and Daniel Amos to 77s.
Yeah.
That was when, we were really riding, watching that tension of, for the artists, trying to figure out how to, not have their Christian art be propaganda or a slogan or a sales jingle or something.
And it made sense to me, even as I thought about my faith, it made sense that this is how God would talk to us in music. He wouldn't be hitting us over the head with some over the top cheesy Christian message. I felt like God would talk to people in art.
Yeah, that's a really that's a good way to put it.
Did you ever have a moment in your 20s, maybe your 30s, where did you deconstruct your faith? Did you leave your faith?
Well, deconstruction, yes, but not not in the sense I've had, and I can think of a lot of close friends that were very much like what you just described, where it was a sense of leaving their faith. In my coming out of college, I really had this sense. I'm like, I said, well, this stuff, I believe it. But I really don't know if it matters unless it's actually doing something. How I first came to Philadelphia was right out of college for a summer program, living in the basement of a church, working with kids in North Philadelphia, running kind of like a church summer camp. There's a kind of a group of us all in our early 20s that kind of moved into the city for the summer and did these things. Tony Campolo is the kind of well-known preacher who kind of launched.
Oh yeah, he was great.
He used to catch my attention so much when he would come and preach. I went to a Christian college, and he would come once a year or so and preach. And he was unlike the other preachers, kind of like Steve Taylor was in music. He just had this way of preaching that was like, this is real stuff, not just platitudes. And so I did that summer, and then found myself working in through the middle of my 20s, running a youth center that reached out primarily to at-risk kids, or just kids that were kind of didn't have any place in any kind of church setting. A lot of them were dropping out of school or struggling with school. During that time, I had begun this kind of this process of deconstruction that was like, I don't buy the platitudes unless they really are making a difference in people's lives. Through that, I eventually found my way as an adult into a different church, Lutheran to be specific. Kind of a different angle on how Christianity is proclaimed, different theology than the Pentecostal church I was in.
What resonated with you? What felt true to you in the way that faith was presented in that context?
Having the idea of grace front and center, and kind of understanding Christianity as experiencing God's grace and forgiveness, and then living in response to it, as opposed to kind of thinking of it as something that if I listen to all the right Christian records and figure out all the right things to do along the way, maybe I'll figure it out, or maybe I'll earn it. This idea that's like, no, it's already yours. Now what are you going to do? The first time I went to services at the Lutheran Church, I remember walking in, and nobody else was carrying a Bible, so that was a big difference. The service started, and we had this book that the service was in, and I wasn't used to that. I was used to the overhead projector and singing songs.
Oh yeah.
And
right.
So I followed along on the service, and as I was going through, as the service was unfolding, I found myself sitting there that first Sunday that we would say a prayer or sing a verse of something, and I'd say, well, I like that. That's in the Bible. Oh, that's good too. And I kind of went through this whole thing, and I'm like, wow. I had this stereotype in my head that this was, kind of was this church that was devoid of the Holy Spirit, or the frozen chosen, or whatever kind of label you want to put on it. And then I discovered, I'm like, no, this church is really just immersed in scripture, but not in a way. I had found scripture as sort of as like, okay, let's pull out the best piece of scripture that will help to make you do things the way I want you to. And here it was, this immersion in scripture, and the central theme was, that it was revealing grace.
Oh, take me to church. I've done so many bad things that hurt. Yeah, take me to church, but not the ones that hurt. 'Cause that ain't the truth, and that's not what it's for. Yeah, take me to church. Oh, take me to church. I've done so many bad things that hurt. Yeah, get me to church, but not the ones that hurt. 'Cause that ain't the truth, and that's not what it's for. I'm gonna sing songs of loving and forgiving, songs of eating and of drinking, songs of living, songs of calling in the night. 'Cause songs are like a bolt of light, and love's the only love you should invite. Songs of longings but fulfilled, songs that won't let you sit still, songs that mend your broken bones and don't leave you alone. So get me down from this here tree, take the rug from off of me, set me on the floor. I'm the only one I should adore.
So what do you guys think Matt does for a living now? Is he a deconstructed Christian, but still likes Jesus kind of in a social gospel way? Maybe he's a social worker who's working with Christian principles, but is not so much into Christianity anymore. Or is he a pastor, Lutheran or otherwise, a pastor in a church who has kind of a renewed interest in his faith because of this encounter he had with a different kind of gospel? Or is he a drummer for a Christian band that was really big in the 90s and 2000s, but really got screwed by the Christian music industry? And so now he just plays in a 90s cover band at a brewery in South Philly. So which one is he? Is he the social worker, pastor, or musician? Matt, did I get any of those right? What are you? Please, we're waiting. Who are you now?
I did for one night try to play drums in a Christian speed metal band, but I don't have any rhythm.
Oh,
no. That's a story for another time. It was in the 90s. That out of that experience in the Lutheran church, I found myself coming to Philadelphia to go to seminary, and I stuck around this area now for more than 20 years, and I've been pastoring for most of that time now.
And this is why it's not why we're friends, and not why I like talking to you. But this is one of the reasons why, in the context of the Electric Jesus podcast, I wanted to talk to you, because you're somebody who went through the Christian music experience, right? And all of us who did and came out of it on the other side, like Eric says in the movie, we grew up, we became who we are as an adult. And some of us took faith with us. Some of us threw it away. Some of us found it again. And some of us never have. A lot of people that love Electric Jesus love it because they feel wistful. They miss that. They miss their time.
My experience in first seeing Electric Jesus and then getting to see it many times since then, what I felt that it provided for me was it really invited me to come face to face with my teenage self and who I was back in 1986. So much of what I experienced is reflected there, and what you put into into the guys in the band and Eric as well. It really invited me to say, what would that kid think of me today? My younger self might have looked at me today and thought, you heathen, you've drifted away this and that, but I hope, and I know that when I look back, I think, wow, that was a part of who I was becoming. I'm grateful that when I listen to some of the old music, there's a lot of it, where then it's maybe a job hazard. Being a pastor and having kind of gone to seminary and all that stuff, whereas I'll listen to a song, or I'll open up that lyric sheet again, and I'll be like, oh well, now I gotta question you on this, and I gotta debate you on that. But then there's there's something that transcends that for me still, that says, this was the journey to here, went through there. Alongside of the things that I would say, boy, that's really changed for me. And I don't agree with, some of the lyrics here and there. So much of it, I still hear and go, wow, no, that's a part of who I am. And to be fair to a lot of the musicians, a lot of it still holds up even on the other side of the journey that I've been on.
We the kids can't keep quiet by the news. The truth, words on fire, silver roots. Double talk, they bother you with their fork.
Electric Jesus is available wherever you stream movies. Check the links in the show notes to find the award-winning film, the soundtrack, a merch table filled with cool EJ stuff, and links to our guests and their work. If you enjoy the podcast, please be sure to rate and subscribe to it on your preferred player, and check out all the amazing extras we curate on the Electric Jesus YouTube page. Thanks for listening.
I'm very well aware of where Cleveland is, Sarah.